Support for this podcast is brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. We take a closer look at our human experiences and use stories to explore culture, history, and contemporary issues. You can find us on thinkwhy.org.
You know, this game can't create world peace, but my goal is to create a classroom environment where everyone feels heard.
Hello, I'm Emmy DeGrappa. This is What's Your Why? Each week we bring you stories asking our guests the question why. We learn about their passion, why they do what they do, why should we care, and what can we learn? What better place to explore the human landscape than from the state known for its incredible landscapes, Wyoming? And what better organization than Wyoming Humanities? Serving our state for over 45 years, we share stories, ideas, and wisdom about the human experience. Welcome to What's Your Why? Today, we are talking to Tori Sanders. She is an educator, game designer, and entrepreneur. Welcome, Tori.
Hi, Emmy. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What does it mean to be a game designer?
I think at its core, game design inspires our competitive spirit, right? It's like Yahtzee, you know? Winning feels great, feels good. But when I look back on my childhood, I think games were a time to be with my family and to laugh and play and just be safe. And that kind of gets to the whole team game design aspect, right? Where a team effort might inspire us and our collaborative spirit so that people have to communicate and collaborate to achieve the extraordinary, right? But the trouble is that some people would do anything to win. So in that sense, games risk becoming a cliche, right? Like, oh, the games people play, right? It could get dirty. But I'm in this really cool space of edu-game design. So that means I need to follow all of those parameters about a competitive spirit and a collaborative spirit and a safe place. Plus I need to add into that educational content. So we've got to enable some kids, we need to enable all kids actually, with a game that allows them to feel successful and to meet educational learning standards.
Are there other educational games that kind of inspired your decision to design a game?
Yes, absolutely. So when I was in college, I started to recognize the potential problems with traditional learning. And at the same time, I played this game called Ballots and Bullets in my Latin American political systems class. And that game made a huge impression on me in terms of sparking intrinsic motivation, in terms of recognizing multiple perspectives in one setting, and also in terms of inquiry-led learning, right? Because it wasn't a lecture, it was a chance to explore all the different currents that motivate people's behavior. But the problem with that game, in my opinion, was that it played out Latin American history in general terms, which means that kids didn't have, or I didn't have, an opportunity to create specific responses to individual problems in, say, Nicaragua as opposed to El Salvador or Peru, right? So that really got my wheels spinning as to how to do it even better.
So your degree was in political science?
So my undergraduate degree was in political science.
Oh my gosh. And so why did you choose, well, first of all, what is the name of your game that you have just created?
So this game is called the Bozeman Trail.
Okay, and why did you choose the Bozeman Trail?
Moving back just a few years, after I graduated from college, I began working with English as a second language kids in a local high school here in Wyoming. And I realized that they were also suffering from traditional learning methods, right? It wasn't just me. So I don't know if it was the curriculum that was a problem, or if it was the methodology, or if the learning environment wasn't safe, or if they were having issues with language. They were embarrassed about their language skills, or they were embarrassed about their reading skills, but they were not participating. And they needed to, not only for their own sake, for learning and their growth, but also for the other kids in the classroom, because they also had a rich experience that was worth sharing, right? So I went back to graduate school to find a framework to build a game. And at that time, someone gave me the dual biography of Custer and Crazy Horse. And that's what led to the Bozeman Trail. Right?
Oh, and in that book, what sparked your interest in the Bozeman Trail? Like, what was it that kind of said, okay, this could be a really great way for
Yeah,
kids
because
to learn?
the author was constantly going back and forth between a Native American perspective and a non-Native perspective.
Okay.
He was constantly juxtaposing these two different ways of living and then ultimately bringing them into one storyline. And I thought that was brilliant, right? Because everyone always thinks that their ideas are important and others aren't. But actually he gave clarity and beauty to both.
Okay, so once you found your inspiration,
Right.
then what was the process in developing the game?
At first, I thought, wow, this is great. This is so perfect for me. I'm such a nerd. I love to read. I love to study. I had so much fun researching all 4 Wyoming treaties, the treaties of Fort Laramie and the treaties of Fort Bridger. Thought this is the perfect career for me. But very quickly, I realized that the game, it's not about the treaties. I mean, it is, right? It's about relationships. And I realized that the only way I was going to get this project off the ground was if I began approaching stakeholders. So this was so terrifying for me, right? I had to reach out to scholars, I had to reach out to teachers, schools, school districts, and I had to reach out to all of the tribes that were party to these treaties, some of whom are still rivals. This was absolutely terrifying. Like, would they talk to me? What would they say, right? So I had to really, there was a process to get over that fear. Ultimately, here's what happened, right? The historian said, this is amazing because we need our scholarship to get out to the widest possible audience. And that's what the game does. Then I reached out to teachers, terrified, right? Teacher said, wow, games are awesome. This is how we level the playing field for real learning, for deep learning. I reached out to schools, right? This was terrifying. But because the game meets all federal learning standards, science standards, Common Core standards, American Indian Ed standards, and social and emotional learning, the schools bought into it, right? And then, and actually this is moving back, right? Because the first people that I approached was the Native American community, right? So that means lots of different tribes. But they responded well too, because they are sovereign nations. And it is in their best interest to make sure that we get these stories out correctly. And that's different for every tribe. They all have different points of view about these treaties.
And so how do you reconcile that in the game? How does that...
Right? We invite every story to come out.
Okay.
So I make a space for every story to come out. And everyone has something really wonderful to offer to this game, right? Because we all have a perspective, and every perspective needs to be validated. That's the scientific method. It's how we test truth, is to make sure that we are communicating and that we can air everything in a positive and a healthy environment so that we can really get to the source of what happened and why. And if we can do that, we can design sustainable policy moving forward.
So are there parts and pieces and you choose a character? Do you
Right.
roll a dice? How do you move forward?
Right.
How do you do that?
So there's 5 teams, and it takes 5 one-hour sessions. So each session we're gaming a different set of socioeconomic events. And at the beginning, kids are in their role, and they really embrace their role because I give them primary and secondary sources, I give them their bias, and I give them their MO, who they are and what they need to accomplish. And so I set them free, and they start gaming, buying and selling and trading Indian annuities and gold and silver and all of these fun little things that kids like to touch. But in the end, they're grappling with complex economic theory, right? Speculation and liquidity, and there are panics, economic panics, and these kids get it. It's complex, but it's not, right? It's just learning how to get along and how to play nice.
So is there an age that you should be to play this game?
So I think we've decided that we're going to do formal R&D with 4th graders, and here's why. When we've played with older kids, they are able to latch on to different ideas. So like in middle school, kids really want to test the limits of capitalism. And it's intense and amazing, right? And in high school, they're focusing more on treaty law, right? And what it means to be a sovereign nation. But the problem with those 2 demographics, and we didn't have this with the 4th graders, they weren't able to come to a win-win solution. So what I mean by that is, in the end, I tell kids that neurocognitive science says that everyone wins more when everyone wins. It's like Bruce Springsteen says, nobody wins unless everyone wins, right? And that's neurocognitive science, and that's also a mathematical model. It's game theory. But these kids who are older, they don't buy into that. They don't think that justice is possible. Whereas with fourth graders who really get into the storyline, they're willing to come up with some policies that make every team feel like they've been heard. So I think we're going to stick with that demographic.
So you really don't think there's any winners and losers?
Obviously, I can't, this game can't create world peace, but my goal is to create a classroom environment where everyone feels heard. So the kids who are on the Lakota team and the Northern Arapaho team and the Northern Cheyenne team, they immediately know that justice is not being served according to their treaties. And they're upset about that. And the requests that they make at the end of the team are very simple. They want to be heard. And so can we accomplish that in one classroom setting? Yeah, we do. We debrief in a way that every team can acknowledge that we manipulated the ecosystem in a way that it shouldn't have been, right? We manipulated monetary policy in a way that was not intelligent for any of the other teams.
Do schools teach Native American history, or do you realize that a lot of them just don't have any idea about what the history is on the Wind River Reservation?
So on the first day, we're going over the map that represents the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie. And it has been my experience to date that no children in Wyoming have been able to name the 2 tribes that live on the Wind River Reservation.
And how many communities have you traveled to so far?
3.
3. And is it your goal to clone yourself, or how are you going to go to every school? And what is your plan? Do you plan to go and travel to as many Wyoming schools as you can and teach them how to play the game and make the game a part of their curriculum?
Absolutely, there is a deficit in knowledge about specific tribal histories in the state. So I thought at first that this could be something that we could market and that kids could play easily with their teachers. And I don't think that's the case at this point. But I do think that slowly, as we go out and bring the game to different communities, I think that slowly we will raise awareness to the point that teachers can facilitate it on their own.
Okay. So that's the impact that you want to have. What's your, if in your dreams, what is your goal ultimately
Pie
for
in the
this
sky.
game? Yeah, pie in the sky.
Yeah. I want for history to be making an impact. I want for history to be the next Fab Lab, right? Like, forget STEM, forget STEAM. Like, history is the cool class, right? It's where kids can come and never be incorrect. It's where kids can come and chase ghosts that are underneath a dusty old textbook, right? Because that's going to put them in the position of saying, we can do better. We know what happened, and we're going to make good on that. Mm-hmm. We're going to create mini nations under one. And, I'm not fooling myself. I know that this is going to be difficult to go back and look at this history. It's not pleasant. But I think that that's part of becoming a better place and a stronger country.
And it would be nice if kids realized that history is yesterday. That they realize that history is always happening, that they are a part of history,
right.
And that it's not just a dusty textbook.
Right. Right. Well, in the one sense, it is. Because I tell everyone, what happened is not your fault. It's heavy, it's ugly, but it's not your fault. On the other hand, it is a bitter medicine that we can take now to do something more intelligent moving forward and more caring, mm-hmm. and more insightful.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Emmy.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening. I'm Emmy DeGrappa. This Think Why podcast is brought to you by the Wyoming Humanities. We use the humanities as a lens to explore the human experience. You can find us online at thinkwhy.org.